Every chateau needs a dog. By a turn of fate 2 years ago, Mademoiselle Truffe joined us after her truffle hunting mother fell for the charms of the neighbour's Australian shepherd. This week, to celebrate Truffe's second birthday, she returned home to the truffle fields where she was born. For the Baronne de la Truffe and her grandmother to give her a lesson in truffle hunting. But first there was an emotional family reunion with her grandmother, mother and brother, and the reintroduction to the delicacy that she knew so well as a newborn.
Oui, c'est bien.
So it's raining, but we're here and we're bringing Truffe to try and find truffles. Serge, do you think it's possible?
It is possible, of course.
Why is it going to be possible for Truffe, or how's it going to be possible? Because she hasn't been trained, but you said that when she was
Well, she was
born.
trained a little bit because when I had her at home, when she was just a tiny little puppy, we used to put truffles on the tits of the mother so that they would get used to the taste. And then I had truffles in the freezer, the size of a tennis ball, and which I would take out on a regular basis so that they can all play together with it for 15 minutes, and then I would put it back into the freezer. And so, I mean, she's been used to smelling truffles.
And she did steal one from your kitchen table a little while ago.
And she did, so that's a good sign.
And so she's Legoto, so her grandmother, we're going to bring her grandmother
Yep.
with her today.
We're taking Ficelle out. She's just an amazing dog. She's found over a ton of truffles in her lifetime. And then she had, it's a funny story, because she had opium. And she did like opium. She didn't tell us that she wanted to have a boyfriend. and so it's one day we just took her out in the field and she was harvesting some truffles, and then suddenly she lay down, raised her leg, and opium arrived.
Okay, so opium is Truffe's mother.
And then opium almost did the same thing, but this time we knew who the father was, and that was the neighbor's dog.
Well, we didn't know till after, right, that it was the neighbour's dog? Or did you know
Oh,
before?
well, I had some kind of suspicions.
Okay. But it had been a little like, how do you say, liaison nocturnale? Or
Exactly. And can you believe it? He was an Australian shepherd.
Yes, so Truffe is half, well, she's half Italian actually, isn't she?
Half Italian, half Australian.
And so
brought
she's,
up in France.
Yes, and so she's Legoto, which is all the dogs that Serge uses to hunt the truffles here. And why are Legotos used here?
I mean, it's quite a long habit, because they are water dogs originally that were used to take the fish out of the ponds in Italy, in the Romagne area. And then that's also where they find quite a lot of truffles. And these dogs love digging all the time. You can have a look at my garden. I mean, it's full of holes everywhere. It's kind of natural for them to dig. So afterwards, it's a matter of training. And the great thing about these dogs is that, I mean, they're very rough and very strong. So we're out in the rain every day, whatever the weather is. And so that's not a problem for them, and they're very good at that.
So normally with your dogs that are well trained, they find the scent of the truffle and they just mark the ground so that you can.
We train them to dig. So usually when they're young puppies, we don't stop them too much. For them, it has to be a pleasure to go and dig them out. It has to be a game, so we always have to be in a positive attitude. So it's a great management training. And then once they found a truffle, then we give them something good to eat. A reward, or sometimes people can play with them with a tennis ball if they used to be playing with a tennis ball. So, but always something positive for them. And then afterwards, once they're really used to finding the truffles, we try to train them not to scratch too much, because otherwise they may ruin the truffle.
Okay, and tell me, how many truffle trees do you have here?
We've planted over 18,000 trees.
18,000. Does that make you the biggest in France?
We're completely organic, so it's the first organic truffle farm in France. Yeah.
First organic truffle farm in France. Okay. Should we give her a go? Let's see how
Let's
she goes.
try, let's go.
Okay.
Ready to go? Allez doggies, allez chien. Allez, on y va. Viens ficelle. Allez Truffe, viens Truffe. Viens là mon chien. Assis, voilà. La ficelle. Alors on va chercher les truffes. C'est bien oui chien. On va chercher la truffe. Allez, viens. Allez, on cherche la truffe. Allez ficelle. Allez ficelle, truffe. Allez, cherche la truffe. Allez, oh oui c'est bien. Allez, cherche la truffe. Allez ficelle. Allez. What we're going to try and do is to make Ficelle find the first truffle, and then we'll try to take Truffe onto it, and so that she understands how it works. Allez Ficelle, là, regarde là, cherche là, ouais, cherche là, Ficelle, là, cherche là, Truffe, allez, là tu cherches, ouais, c'est bien, allez, cherche là, oui, c'est bien, viens là. I'm going to check if there is one. It smells. I can easily smell the truffle. The only problem is that it's raining, so it's not ideal, obviously. And it's the end of the season, so they may be tiny. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a là? Ouais, tu sais bien, tu cherches. Elle est où là? Ficelle. Là, cherche là, là. Cherche la truffe. Elle est où? Elle est là? Oh, elle est là. Ah oui. Truffe. There it is. Here's the truffle. Tiens, Truffe. Là, cherche là. Non, regarde, ouais. Regarde là. Cherche la truffe. Ouais, qu'est-ce qu'il y a là? Oui, allez, c'est bien. Moi, c'est bon ça. Ah bah oui, elle la mange. C'est bien. Ah bah elle aime la truffe. She's just eating them. C'est bien. Expensive training. What I do most of the time, the easiest thing to do is that there are two of us, one with each dog, because what is complicated is to give orders to two dogs at the same time, especially when you have one to train. So the eldest one shows the young one how it works. So that's why we took Ficelle, and we hope that she'll find more, and then by repeating the exercise in the end, hopefully she will understand. Allez chien, Truffe, cherche.
Because she didn't seem to show a whole lot of interest. Is that...
But I'm not really worried. It will come, so that's why I let her eat the truffle at the start, so that she understands it's something good for her. And Truffe, viens là. Allez. We have to be careful because sometimes some dogs understand very well and very fast, and then they start harvesting them on their own. We have an objective, and I insist on the word average. We have an objective of an average of 20 kilos per hectare after the 12th year, so it's quite a long process. These were planted in 2011, so now the production is getting much better. It's still to improve, especially this year because it was quite a bad year. But it's a field that did pretty well despite the fact that it was a bad year. It was a bad year because it was we had a lack of rain this summer and throughout the whole year in general, with 40% less of water during the whole year. So obviously that doesn't help. It's still a mushroom, even though it takes 6 months to grow. So that's why it's very dependent on the weather. We're going to go in this direction because I believe that Ficelle has found something. Allez Ficelle, cherche la truffe. C'est bien, tu cherches. Allez, Ficelle. Allez, le chien. Cherche la truffe. C'est bien, Ficelle. C'est bien, tu cherches la truffe. I just probably got one. Allez, là, tu cherches. Allez, cherche la truffe. Voilà, c'est bon. C'est bon. Truffe. Viens là, truffe. Viens là, truffe. Là. Doucement. Là, regarde là. regarde là, Truffe. Là, Truffe, là, regarde là, viens là, ouais, cherche là tu cherches, elle est où là? Cherche la truffe, elle est où? Oui, c'est bien, allez, tu grattes, allez, là tu cherches, là, regarde, c'est quoi ça? Mais oui, c'est bien, attends, mange pas tout, t'as vu ça? Oui, c'est bon ça, c'est une jolie truffe, hein? Oh oui, c'est bien, mon chien. The perfume is just amazing on this one. It's really the end of the season. It's a small one, about 20 grams. So which is good size for really the end of the season. We're mid-March, so obviously that doesn't help. Season is usually over at this time. But it's a good way of training the dogs because it has a very strong smell. Oh oui, ça c'est bon ça. Oui, ça c'est bon ça. Oui, c'est bien. So we organize visits every Saturday at 3 o'clock. Usually we take people out it's a 2-hour tour where I explain all the history about the truffles, dating 4th century BC till today. And then I take everyone out with the dogs. We harvest truffle. Everyone usually takes a truffle out. And then afterwards we go to the lab so that I explain what makes a good truffle from a bad truffle, especially explaining how people are cheated with artificial flavors. Which is probably our worst enemy. And then finally we end up with a tasting in our cellars, which are all lighted in candles, old style cellar, and that's usually quite a fantastic experience. It's a matter of patience. You should never get you should never lose your temper. Allez le chien, allez ficelle. Tu cherches la truffe. Ici, il y a une truffe là. C'est bien. C'est bon. Là, truffe. Ficelle. Là. Cherche là. Cherche là. Regarde là. Oui, c'est bien. Oui. Allez, on gratte, on cherche là. Ouais, c'est super. Allez, vas-y, tu cherches. Allez, tu cherches. Allez, là tu cherches. Elle est là la truffe, regarde. Truffe. Là. Elle est où? Là. Regarde là. Elle est là. Vas-y, tu cherches. Elle est où? Mais oui, c'est bien. Allez, cherche là. Allez, tu grattes. Ah bah oui, t'as bien gratté. She's had a good bite on it. C'est bien. Oh oui, t'as vu? Oh, c'est bon ça. Regarde. Un petit morceau, tiens, truffe. Oui, c'est bon ça. You see it's with nice black veins like that, black and white veins. Oh oui, ça c'est bon ça. Moi c'est bon ça la truffe. Mais oui, ça c'est très bon. The great advantage at the end of the season, that's when really the truffles are completely ripe. You need to know that when the truffle starts growing, it's completely red outside and white inside. And at the beginning of the season, of the harvest season, which starts mid-November, most of the time it may be kind of black outside, but if you just shave it a little bit, inside it's going to be white or grey, so it's not completely ripe yet. And it's really with the first frost that the black color starts, and that's really when you get the flavor. And most of the time that's in January. Best time is January or February. We ship daily worldwide. It's amazing now. You can ship anything around the world within 48 or 72 hours. So we have customers throughout the world. You cannot really plant trees in every field. It's very important to choose the right type of field. We need basically a pH that is above 7. Why is that? Because the truffle is a symbiotic exchange between the tree and the truffle. And the truffle transforms all the minerals in the ground into food for the tree. So if you don't have any minerals in the ground, then obviously that doesn't work. So that's why you need a pH above 7. And here we have ideal fields for that with a pH close to 8, and so we plant very small trees that are about that size, and hopefully after 4 or 5 years, because I mean there's a lot of work, there's quite a long process before you start harvesting. So 4 to 5 years before harvesting the first truffle, but it's just a truffle here and there, so nothing really exciting. You can start having something relevant after 8 to 9 years, and full production doesn't come before at least 12 years. Very long process. So that's why in the end, truffles are not expensive for what it is. Well, when you take into consideration all that is needed to produce a truffle, obviously in the past, at the 19th century, they would grow in the wild. But obviously if it's in the wild, it's not that expensive for what it is. But here, trying to recreate the wild here in the field is quite an expensive process. So at the end, it's not really expensive for what it is. And the other mistake that we make is that we always give a price per kilo. But you never buy a kilo, you only need 10 grams. So basically 10 grams is 10 euros on an average. So it's less than a T-bone steak or anything like that. So it's not that expensive. Mon chien, allez, cherche la truffe.
Look at you. I mean, she looks like she's had a good time.
She did have a good time. I mean, she's improving all the time. Yeah, là, bah oui. No, she did quite a good job. Obviously, the first one was a bit complicated, but it was obviously her first experience. And then the second one, she started scratching a little bit. And then the third one, I mean, she really was onto it. So, no, it's repeating this exercise that really makes them become good truffle dogs. And there's good potential because she seems to like them, looking at the way she's eaten it.
Yeah, well, now she's got a new addiction from today.
Exactly. Maybe you'll find some at Purnon, who knows?
Maybe, we can only hope. Let's go home and try. But thank you so much for bringing us, for taking her out in the rain. I know it wasn't the ideal conditions, but I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I hope she comes back again and she improves all the time.
Yes, true.
So that she deserves her name.
Yeah, I know. Yeah? It's kind of a bit tragic if she had this name and isn't able to live up to it, isn't it?
Well, she's got a nice one there, a little truffe.
La truffe de truffe ressemble à une truffe.
Yeah.
So right now we're right next to Chinon in the Loire Valley. And
yeah, south of the Touraine area, which is really the birthplace of truffle growing. That's where Mr. Meuléon, who lived only 5 miles away from here, in 1791, seeing that the truffles were growing out in the wild, he had the idea of seeding some acorns in the ground. And in 1799, that's when he harvested his first truffle.
Oh, as they were building Purnon.
Exactly, same time.
I wonder if they knew each other, possibly not.
And the growing of truffle, the growth of truffle, farming truffles began to be a very big activity here in this area, where in Richelieu they used to harvest and they used to retail about 20 tons of truffles in 1880. Same quantity in Loudun, so really Purnon is in both of these cities. So these two cities, that's 40 tons, that's the French production today. So you see the entire French production was just produced here in this little area 100 years ago. So it shows how big it was in the past. And unfortunately the production was divided by 100 in just less than a century. And we're trying to make it grow again, but it takes a bit of time, unfortunately.
Okay. And so it's interesting that Purnon sits in this area that's so good for truffle hunting, yet Purnon itself is not so great for growing the...
I'm sure there are some areas in Purnon on the sides of the Château that could be good. If there isn't too much clay, because I know it's built on a clay mountain, so probably where there is less clay, it could be good.
Okay. Oh well, Truffe, should we go home and plant some truffle trees maybe? So the trees that you've planted, they're oaks?
We plant primarily oak trees, but there are a whole variety of trees that can actually produce truffles. There are about 20% of all the trees on the planet that can actually produce truffles. And in these type of trees, you have different types of oaks, but you have also hazelnuts, lime trees, hornbeams, black pine, alpine, cedar, cistus, just to give you an idea of the few trees that can actually produce many kinds of truffles, as we estimate to be over 100 varieties of truffles around the world.
And so why is it that you've chosen the oaks that you've chosen here? Or it's not all oaks that you have?
The field in which we were was 100% oak, but now I try to, we know that we have very good results on oak trees, but now I'm seeing that also on other trees like hornbeam or lime trees, we have some very good results also. So the new fields I'm planting, every 10 trees I plant something different, because you have to imagine yourself in 15 years time. Even though we prune the trees all the time, it's going to be like a little forest. So if it's quite big, if the field is big, you need to be able to know where you are, or to be able to remember which tree was producing and so on. And so it's important to be able to see yourself within 15 years time, like you're doing probably in Purnon.
Hopefully in 15 years' time we'll be dry.
It will be finished, it will be dry for sure, I hope so. It's fake ones.
She likes the fake ones too.
Ah, bon, c'est bon ça.
So can you explain to us the name Baron de Truffe?
Oh, Baron de la Truffe. Oh, it's quite simple. All the people that are usually addicted to truffles say that truffles are a bit like drugs. So before you had the drug barons, so today you have the truffle baron.
Oh, okay. So if you'd like to get a truffle addiction, you can just visit Serge's website. I'll put all the details below, and follow him on Instagram. And thank you so much, Serge, and we'll see you soon.
Looking forward to that.